Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Dallas, thank you so much as always. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you about the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson of Louisiana, your thoughts and your willingness to work with him.
Listen, I'm willing to work with anyone who wants to make sure that we keep the American people as the only priority and not a twice impeached former president. I had an opportunity to be part of the escort committee because I am in leadership. He did shake everyone's hand before we went into the chamber, and he specifically said, I want to work with all of you. So all I can do is hold him at his word right now. I can tell you that his record is very concerning. But this is a new chapter, so we will see what happens. I will also tell you that I am very excited that we have a president that has a veto pen. So just in case he decides that he wants to do something that is counterproductive to moving this country forward, I know that I have a president that will use his veto pen, and I feel pretty confident that our Senate would not let certain harmful bills come through either.
What was your impression of him? You talked a little bit about the fact that he shook everybody's hands, and that you take him for at his word for him wanting to work with you all. So, what was your overall impression of that? Did you take him seriously?
I mean, is there very much that we're taking seriously from the Republicans in the US House right now? Not really, but hey, at least we can get back to quote unquote work. And I say quote unquote because we really have not been working very much. We've been spinning our wheels. We've been doing things that really weren't going anywhere, such as the impeachment hearing that wasn't going to go anywhere. And we weren't getting through our appropriations bills. So I am definitely hoping that he will do right. But do I expect right out of the Republicans right now? I don't. That's just my honest opinion in my first 10 months of working in the House.
So, as you know, the government is going to be running out of money November 17th, 3 weeks from today when we are speaking. And so I'm wondering how confident you are that the government will remain open in that time and that Democrats and Republicans will be able to come together on a short-term funding bill.
I'm lacking confidence again, but I thought we were going to shut down before. And at the 11th hour, McCarthy did produce a clean CR that didn't have the Ukraine funding, but overall it was a clean CR. And so there are talks that the new speaker has tasked some pretty radical people with the job of coming up with a continuing resolution, because there's no way now that they wasted 3 weeks deciding who their leader was going to be that we will be able to get through the rest of the appropriations bills in time. We do have a pretty aggressive calendar, though. We were supposed to be home for this upcoming 2-week period doing work in the district. We are not going to be able to be home. We will be in DC. We will be voting. So there are appropriations bills that are being put up. These are appropriations bills that will never see the light of day because, once again, the Senate will not sign off on them. The president will not sign off on them. But we need to get something done, and that would be a continuing resolution. Byron Donalds is one of the people that is tasked with working on the continuing resolution. So they may propose something. I doubt that it will be clean. So we will see kind of what they come up with.
Well, one of the things that Speaker Johnson said, at least to the Republican conference, is that he wants a short-term funding bill either through mid-January or mid-April, depending on what the conference wants to do. And then for the next budget, have all the funding bills before the August recess next year. So what's your thought about that?
I think it's admirable. First of all, we know that the previous speaker was kicked out because he did do a continuing resolution. So kind of dealing with the reality head on, I think is what he needed to do. And honestly, I'm still waiting for the CR to be brought to the floor. I am cautiously optimistic because we do have a speaker that did vote to shut the government down. He was not on board with continuing to keep the government open when we did do our CR. He was one of those Republicans that voted against it. So I don't know what makes sense for him to keep the doors open. I do have a feeling that if they produce something, it will not be clean. It may be something that only has funding, say, for defense, and no one else. But they will do something that I think will be less than appropriate to make sure that we are taking care of the entirety of the federal government. And the last time we had a long shutdown, it was air traffic controllers that were able to stop that shutdown, by literally stopping planes from moving. So, it'll be really important that they keep in mind their constituents, they keep in mind their businesses, they keep in mind inflation, and making sure that we are not doing things that will further frustrate our supply chains. So we will see what they come up with, but I don't really count on this bunch to be able to come up with solutions to complicated problems, not based on what I saw over the last 3 weeks.
You have been outspoken in your support for Israel and condemning Hamas, and I wanted to know just what your thoughts are right now. President Biden has proposed a $106 billion bill. Money would go to Israel, Ukraine, border security, among other things. Where are you on that bill?
So I've not had a chance to review it. I do appreciate that this is a comprehensive package. It's one that doesn't leave Ukraine out. It includes Ukraine. It also makes sure that there is funding for those Palestinians in Gaza, as well as making sure the border is in there. So I feel as if it's kind of like a Christmas tree. There's something for everyone in there. And as you start to parse it apart, then you would most likely lose support. So I think that overall, I like the way that he has packaged it together. He's the one that's had the conversations with Israel about what amount of money they need. And I do want to make it clear, Jack, because I think that for those that have not understood that this is a conflict that has existed for decades, I did have an opportunity to go to Israel. I will be talking about this a little bit more on social media here in the upcoming weeks, now that we have an actual speaker and we can move forward and have these very real conversations. I was in Israel in August. I was at the Gaza Strip. I was at the kibbutz where children were slaughtered, specifically the kibbutz where they said that children were beheaded. I was there. I have pictures. I learned so much about not only the way that the Israelis were living, but also the way that the Palestinians were living. I sat down and I spoke with the Palestinian PM. I spoke with the leader of the opposition party. I also spoke with Netanyahu. And I have, my thoughts about all of my conversations, but Hamas, Hezbollah, as well as the Jihad, they are all terrorist organizations, period. Hamas does not equal Palestinians. And right now, I stand with the president when I say that no innocent lives should be lost. We should be very careful to make sure that there is an observance of international law. That means this idea that, and it's not even an idea, there has to be a minimalization of innocent lives lost, and that is on both sides. The unfortunate part for Israel is when you're dealing with a terrorist organization, they don't play by the rules. Everyone else has to abide by the rules. That includes Israel. And so for those that may not feel as if the president has gone far enough or he hasn't said the words that they want him to say, I want people to understand that the president of the United States did not fly into the middle of an active war zone to have tea and crumpets. There are conversations that take place behind closed doors, and I feel very confident knowing what I know about the president, his experience in foreign policy, his understanding of the various things that are brewing in this world. I am concerned based on things that I saw and some top secret things that I did, not only in Israel, but in other countries over the 6-week recess. And I am concerned about making sure that this does not end up being a bigger conflict. And it's already starting to get bigger. So I just need people to trust and believe that there are those of us that are fighting to make sure that we can live blissfully and not know about the conflicts because the conflicts don't hit us here at home. I just need people to be patient and understand that if we walk away from any ally, that will send a terrible message to other allies. It will also send the message that our enemies want us to send. And we are trying to balance a lot of conflicts right now.
And as far as, you mentioned that you went to this kibbutz that came under attack. And so
Yeah.
were you able to check on the people that you may have met there and see how they're doing? What was your response when you saw what happened?
So when I saw what happened, I didn't initially know where. And then ultimately information started to come out. And there was a woman who basically gave us the history behind the kibbutz and explained to us why she lived there. She also had these various pieces of rockets that had fallen. Iron Dome had intercepted them. So there was kind of constant like rockets falling and things like that. And we immediately found out that she specifically was not there because she was studying abroad at the time of the attack, but that she had been on the phone with her father. And the last that I knew, she had not spoken to her father again. So I'm not really sure like what's happened with her father. I missed a follow-up kind of phone call that we were doing, a follow-up Zoom to kind of check in on some people that we had met because of speaker stuff. So not quite sure. I do know that she specifically was okay. We met with some other people. There was a woman who basically focused on the mental health of the people that live there. And she actually, I want to say she was from like Boston. She was American Israeli. And it was just interesting to hear her say that literally they have to counsel the children and counsel the people that live here because of the constant kind of terror that exists in the region. And all I could think about was that we have colleagues here in the United States on the other side of the aisle that continuously say that people that are literally risking their lives to come to America are invading. They're invaders at our border, not really knowing what an invasion at your border looks like. These are people and children that get trained to take cover. They have these bomb shelters that have cartoons on them. And they have sirens that go off and they tell them, you've got 5 seconds when you hear that siren to go get into a bomb shelter. Even the babies, they train like itty bitty babies to put their arms up so that someone in like the daycare facility can pick the babies up if the alarms go off. It is something that I never imagined in anyone experiencing really until I was able to see it. And then to hear what happened, it caught me off guard. Because when I was there, I thought about the children in general. And I thought, this is not normal. This has to be something that is scary every single day. Never imagining that, because they explained to us about the technology at the fence that everybody kind of saw, the tractor trailer driving through. They explained the technology behind it, that kind of stuff. So it made me feel a little better, but it was still very scary. And the only thing that we were aware of that we were even thinking about is that they had well over, I want to say it was between 130,000 and 150,000 rockets that they were of the impression that Hamas had. And when I call Hamas a terror organization, I want people to understand they terrorize the Palestinian people. They terrorize the Israelis. They are terrorists. And, it is one of the saddest things to think about is that there are a people that literally have nowhere to go. You talk about the invasion at the border. These are people that are at least able to get out. They may be risking their lives as they're traversing to get to the United States. The people in Gaza have nowhere to go. And that is beyond heartbreaking to know that, like, they've lived under the thumb of terror, in addition to the fact that they are literally stuck because the borders have been closed. It is
Well, I mean,
scary. It is sad.
Egypt could take these folks in,
Egypt could, but they're
but they
not.
don't want them.
Like, they're not, right? Like, that is the travesty of it all, is that Hamas has implanted themselves so deeply into the people of Gaza that Egypt, I'm presuming, is nervous about Hamas kind of coming in. It's kind of like when we do talk about our border and we talk about the cartel. Like, we don't want the cartel coming in, right? It's one of those things. And what is the answer, right? The answer is to get rid of Hamas. But, like, how do you get rid of Hamas? And where does the Hamas come from? And where do you get the radicalization that gives rise to Hamas? And this is an age-old issue, an age-old dispute that we've been trying to kind of come to a conclusion on for a very long time.
Should Israel be allowed to wipe Hamas out? Because in Hamas's charter, they specifically say they call for the destruction of Jews in Israel.
I absolutely believe that Hamas, kind of like for, Americans, if you understand what Al-Qaeda was to us, same difference. Hamas is a terror organization. And literally one of the pictures that I'm going to share is also of those from Hezbollah. And Hamas and Hezbollah and the Jihad, they are supported by Iran. And when I came out of a tunnel that was dug at the Syrian border, that Hezbollah dug, there was someone from Hezbollah taking pictures of us right across the border. I am not telling y'all what I read or saw on Twitter. I am telling you what I know and I saw from my own two eyes, and I plan to share. No one has an issue with the Syrians. No one has an issue with, I'm not going to say no one has an issue with Palestinians, because I know that is part of the fight and the conflict. But the issue is terrorist, period. And I think that Hamas should absolutely be wiped out. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not military. I do know that when it came down to Al-Qaeda, when it came down to bin Laden, we had to be very patient and we had to be very strategic to get him. We did not get bin Laden the next year. We didn't get him the year after that. It took a while, but we did it. And so I think that we really need to make sure that we're relying on really good intelligence to make sure that we are doing this in a very surgical way, instead of people feeling as if there's a butcher that's going about trying to get rid of Hamas.
My last question for you, and I appreciate your time, and that is just regarding anti-Semitism. We've seen lots of hatred out on social media, in the streets, etc. What do you make of this?
What's interesting is that there's a lot of things going on at one time. I think that there are those that feel as if this is the first time that they've ever been able to have a wider reaching conversation about the conflict as a whole. Not that very many people have talked about settlements. Most people have no idea about settlements and some of the disputes, and like the fact that, there was an actual Palestine and then there wasn't a Palestine. Like, a lot of people don't know the full history, and that's because the conversations have never really, as far as I'm concerned, reached a fever pitch to where Americans were paying attention. And so I think that there are those that want to have the age-old conversation. They want to talk about what has not been talked about. You've got that going on. Then you have those that are literally, they've been anti-Semitic. And this is a great opportunity for the trolls to go ahead and amplify their messages. We've gone back and forth about the anti-Semitism. We've seen the synagogues that have been attacked. We have been struggling with this in general. So there are those that have had those feelings, especially so many of my colleagues on the right that have stoked these Nazi types, these white supremacist type. So it's like they're jumping in and they are antagonizing the situation. And then I think that there are those that are seeing the what is happening to those in Gaza. And, you know, it's just kind of like the hospital bombing when that happened. And initially there were people that said, you know, hospital, 500 killed, and the Israelis targeted this hospital. I mean, that is very strong and dangerous rhetoric. And I actually received a text message like, why aren't you speaking out about this? And I said, and the person said, you spoke out about Hamas. And I said, let me clarify something. Hamas is a terror organization. Hamas said that they attacked Israel. Israel said Hamas attacked Israel. Israel didn't lay claim to attacking this hospital. Hamas didn't lay claim. The jihad didn't lay claim. So therefore, when I'm in a situation like that, I have to take my top security briefing that comes from U.S. intelligence. That's where I get my information from. I don't get it from the news. I don't get it from the internet. And as a sitting member of Congress, to go out and say certain things against an ally without the information can have far-reaching consequences for even our relationships with other ally organizations, ally countries. So I say all that to say that there are those that see the death of innocents in Gaza, and it angers them because they know that these babies weren't the ones that went over and perpetrated the killings. And so there's anger on both sides. And I really need everybody to take it down a notch and honestly start to learn the overall history. And I don't want the conflict over there to pour out over here, because it's one of the reasons we are all here. We're a country of immigrants. We're a country that believes in democracy. We're a country of freedom. And so we've got to get back to what brings us together in this country and focus on that and come up with solutions. Let's be mindful and let's make sure that we're talking to lawmakers and finding out, do they want to support the liberation of the people in the Gaza Strip? Do they want to support a democracy for the Israelis? And find out where they stand and make sure that they are supporting policies that support these things that they say they stand for. And lasting peace in the Middle East is something that would benefit everybody. But I need people to understand that we don't need to give more airtime to what Iran and even we know that Putin is jumping in on this. And I'm sure that Xi is right around the corner as well. Let's not allow our enemies, our collective enemies, to anger us and tear us apart here. Let's work on solutions.
I was just going to ask you that, you know, on college campuses, we've seen students yelling death to Jews and, you know, basically getting rid of Israel altogether. There have been signs on the streets, people holding signs saying, you know, we want a clean world, you know, basically referring to Jews as dirty.
Yeah.
So what do you make of that?
You know, as a Black woman who's a civil rights lawyer, it's just unacceptable. Not here, right?
You know, what we've seen on college campuses is some students chanting death to Jews. We've seen people on the street, in some streets in some cities, holding up signs basically saying that Jews are, we want a clean world, essentially saying Jews are dirty. So what do you make of this?
It's unacceptable. As a Black woman who has worked in the civil rights world, who fights every single day for equity across the board, we are supposed to be better than this. And number one, I don't think we should ever, even if you have issue with, and you can take issue with how Israel has responded. You can take issue with Netanyahu. You can take issue with the IDF. You can take issue with anybody that you want to take issue with, because that's the country that we live in, right? Where we can have disagreements. But then saying that an entire race of people, an entire religion, an entire grouping of people should die, that's wrong. It's just wrong. It's the same thing when it comes to Black folk. It's the same thing that we see with Islamophobia, right? Like the fact that a 6-year-old was killed by, his landlord in Chicago, that is unacceptable. And that's why I need people. It's one thing to be empathetic. It's one thing to care about what's going on somewhere else. But it is another thing to wake up and recognize the privilege that we have in this country and recognize who we are and who we are supposed to be and rise to that occasion. There is a reason that we look one way and we are the greatest country in the world. And not every other country is who we are. That's just what it is. But we are not supposed to do the hate. And I say not supposed to because I know there has been a rise in all hate. All hate. We have seen the numbers ever since Trump was elected. The numbers have been off the chain in everything. Xenophobia, Islamophobia, everything has been on the rise. I need us to get back to who we are supposed to be in this country and recognize that the beauty of this country is that we are a country of immigrants and we live in a free world where we can have opinions, but we should never castigate an entire race, an entire people, and say that they should die. We should never do that. But we can absolutely do that when it comes to a terror organization.
Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Dallas, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.